Today, I am honored and so happy to present to you Rita Ballenger. Rita is the founder and volunteer of Abolition Bakery in Cleveland, Ohio. Welcome, Rita. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Lynn, for having me.
Well, I'll tell you, you were presented to me, somebody sent me a link about you fairly recently, and I was so impressed with the work you're doing at a grassroots kind of level and how you got involved in all of this human trafficking that we are fighting to raise awareness, education, resources. I called you up. We made a plan to talk on the phone, and we could have talked for hours. So I want you to explain to the audience, who is Rita Ballenger and what is Abolition Bakery?
Great. Thank you, Lynn, for this opportunity. Rita Ballenger is a woman who retired 9 years ago. My plan when I retired was to go back to work part-time. My career was working in a level 1 trauma center in the operating room as a surgical technologist. We are the ones who pass instruments during surgery. I loved that job. I also taught the surgical technology program at a local community college called Tri-C. And so I loved my job, and I thought when I retired at the age of 52 that I would go back to work part-time. I decided that I wanted to take a year off as a decompression year just to relax and to really to hear God's voice with what his plan was for the rest of my life. And during that year, I was surprised with the college sent me 55 free credit hours as a retirement benefit. And so I decided to enroll in their culinary program, specifically the baking track.
This is what I love, this part of your story. Okay.
Right. And then also during that decompression year, somebody invited me to a human trafficking presentation. And I expected to go and hear about human trafficking in the third world. And I was shocked to find out that they were talking about human trafficking in the United States and in our city. And so that rocked my world. And they offered for us to be trained as presenters. So I did take that training, and I did start doing presentations. But as I said, I started this culinary program, and it was a 2-year program. And I felt like God had dropped a desire in my heart to want to use this new baking skill to somehow help human trafficking survivors and those who were helping them, to help the whole cause. But it was such a weird idea. I had no idea what that would look like. And so really it was just a desire in my heart for about 2 years, just kind of rolling around in there. And me thinking, I just don't know what to do with this. I don't know how to connect these two. And then toward the end of the culinary program, a new store opened up in my neighborhood. And I asked them if they would like to sell my sourdough bread. And they said yes. And that was the beginning of Abolition Bakery.
This is such a wonderful story because you touched upon a couple of things. You touched upon the number one question I am asked all the time. I didn't know that happens here. Human trafficking. What do you mean? They always say, oh, I thought it's over there. Wherever over there might be. And like you, I became so passionate because I knew about human trafficking, but I really didn't know about human trafficking. And as I started reading the facts and just jumping in, right in every single community, there is something going on in and about human trafficking. And not just cities. We're talking about all across the United States.
Yes.
Now, we all agree that this is a global epidemic, a plight on humanity.
Yes.
But I was so overcome with it's right in our own backyards. So I simply it is such an overwhelming subject matter and hard to wrap your mind around. So a lot of people don't want to talk about it or push it out of their minds or don't want to deal with it. And I don't blame them. However, I broke it apart and I want to present to people simply facts. And simply, you're such a wonderful example of someone doing something within your own community. And I believe doing all of these things within one's community then will help with our big picture. As overwhelming as all this is, we have to start somewhere. So I believe the first step is just raising awareness and education.
Yes.
So let me go back. You went to this class on human trafficking. And what, were you just overwhelmed? You were amazed? You were like, it's happening right here in Cleveland?
Yes. It was one of those times in life where you walked out saying, I have to do something.
Exactly.
What can I do? What could be my part? And because I taught, I was used to speaking publicly. So the thought of taking their training for being a presenter wasn't daunting to me. So that was the first step. And that helped educate me even further. And then, like I said, then the other desire to somehow match up the baking skills with helping the cause for human trafficking survivors. You know, that came after that. But yes, it was one of those like watershed moments in life where you say, you know, I could walk away from this and ignore this, or I could I could do something. I have a skill. I could be a public presenter. I could do that. That doesn't rattle my cage too much. And
good for you.
And and I'm number 10 of 11 kids, so I've always spoken.
Wow, now that's something I didn't know about you. So
well, yeah. So being in a family like that, it's like you're always in public speaking.
Perfect. You speak up. You're raising your voice. Wow, 11 kids. Well, wow, that's a whole separate story. Wow, that's
I was number 10 of 11 children. Wow. Good Catholic family. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's very interesting. So you're a mom, you're a grandma.
Yes.
Tell me about when you told your family or friends or just started doing this. What was the reaction? What happened?
Yes, the reaction was 100%. Everybody was on board. There was not one person who said, well, that's crazy and you shouldn't do that and I don't see how that will ever work. Everybody who I told was supportive, and people immediately started casting their own vision for it. Like my one friend, Claire, as soon as I started selling the bread, she said, Rita, there's an arts and crafts festival nearby. She said, we should go and sell bakery there. And so we did that. And then the next thing she said was, at Christmas time, she said, we should put together a teacher's Christmas gift for all the moms who need teacher's gifts. She said, we could do that with biscotti and coffee.
I love that, yes.
Yeah, and so we've been doing that every year. That's one of our annual Christmas drive, we call it. So anyway, so like I said, people started casting their own vision, and there was always one more job to do, and people just naturally came on board. Everybody wanted to be on board. And I think the reason they did was because they felt like, this is something I can do. I can come alongside you and help make biscotti. I can go to a farmer's market and stand next to you and help sell the product. So it was definitely something that people felt like they could come alongside and that they were doing something to help the cause.
I love that story because I'm also finding that once I bring up and the subject matter and talk to different individuals, everybody pretty much leaves me with, please keep me in mind. What can I do to help?
Yes.
And that is so fulfilling to know there is all this help out there.
Yes.
So what I want to do is I want to bring people such as you, Rita, other people I'm meeting along the way, people really doing the work together.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm finding that there are so many people we don't know about, we don't hear about, really
Mm-hmm.
doing God's work that
Mm-hmm.
need to be showcased but the bottom line is they're really getting the work done.
Mm-hmm.
So that is, I filled you in a little bit. My whole background is entertainment and show business.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a client who wrote a book about domestic violence. And in doing that research, I started reading also about human trafficking and just could not believe.
Yeah.
And with that, like you, I was like, I have to do something.
Yes.
And then reading about the children involved just broke my heart. And I'm like,
Yes.
I have a platform. I
Yes.
must. So it's like you, like I must, like I wake
Yeah.
up every day, I must. Now, I will
Yes.
say with that, I've gotten tremendous appreciation and people wanting to help. A little bit of flack. I do travel. I'm in Washington and LA contacts and all that. But here's what I say, Rita. I, along with people like you, we know the realities. We're very realistic. We are not going to end human trafficking.
Mm-mm.
It's
Mm-mm.
too big.
Mm-hmm.
However, raising awareness,
Yes.
education, providing
Yes.
resources, and just talking about it is good enough for me, knowing every day I've done my best when I go to bed.
Yeah.
I've done my best to do that. That to
Yes.
me is, getting it out there and doing the real work. So,
Yes.
how do you feel about that? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, as the years go on, I'm becoming more and more passionate about the awareness piece. So, at a farmer's market I was at a few years ago, a teacher approached my table and she asked me if I would do human trafficking presentations for her class. So for a few years while she was at that school, I had the opportunity to go to her classroom once or twice a year, and she would let me present a human trafficking video to every class. I think I presented 6 to 8 times.
How old were they, Rita?
They were high schoolers, so they would
Okay.
have ranged from 9th to 12th grade.
Okay.
And so the goal of that was to let them know what human trafficking looks like and to be aware of it being in their surroundings and their environment, that their friends could get, they or their friends could get sucked up into it. And what does that look like? What if they recognize some of these, I would call them symptoms of human trafficking? What can they do as a friend to help their friend to get pulled back out of it? And so that was the awareness piece. And but my heart even is really going out even to the younger girls now, even the middle school girls, because these kids are so at risk and they don't
Yes.
even know it. And so I have grandchildren, as you said, and the oldest one is 12. And, my daughter and her husband and I were having serious conversations of how do we make her aware,
Yes.
and how do we make her friends aware? Because this problem isn't getting any better.
No, we know the facts are that trafficking,
Yeah,
believe it or not, is only getting worse.
right.
It's not getting better.
No, not getting better. The many faces of human trafficking are amazing. You hear story after story after story, and there's so many variables, but there's also the constants, and the constants
Yes.
are that there's fraud, force, and coercion in every situation. There is usually a recruiter in the situation. There's a buyer. There's a pimp. And so our job is, as just being in society and caring about this, is to recognize what doesn't look right about this situation. And should I keep the Human Trafficking Task Force phone number in my phone. And when I see something that doesn't look right, I call them and I
Good
say,
for you.
"Here's
Yes.
and I say, this is what I saw. Do you want to do anything about it?" And they'll say yes or no. And if they do, the detective will call me back within a couple hours and he'll ask more questions. And So it's not hard to be proactive. It's just knowing what you're looking for.
Well, that's it. It may seem simple to you and me because we're doing this every day and we're involved, but I am just simply trying to share that phone number with people and telling them commit to memory or carry it on you. You can call and just ask questions. It's simply
Yes.
call and ask questions.
Yes, yes.
And I think just little key pieces of information like that, again, to me, make all the world of difference. I've had some people say to me, well, I don't know. It didn't look right, that young woman or, teen girl with that man or what. I didn't know. I said, but you can simply call the number and you'll leave it up to them to decide.
Absolutely.
And
That's
it's
exactly
not,
it.
it's not, anything bad. And,
No,
they actually have. Well, I'm talking about the trafficking hotline is the number I actually use.
Yes.
They actually have over 200 languages that they speak. So
Yeah.
people can,
Yeah.
I don't even know there were 200 languages. I mean, it's like over 200 languages. So there's like I tell people there's no excuse. But
Yes, that's great.
what would high school, now that was wonderful that you were allowed
Yes.
to go in because of the red tape.
Yes.
I can't go into the public school system here in New York and talk about anything. We have all this talk about sex education,
Yeah.
which is a whole other debate. But
Yes.
that is being talked about for years, all the time, forced on the kids, however you want to take it.
Yes.
But the minute I bring up, I believe, and one of the issues I'll be working on is we need human trafficking taught. And I also believe
Yes.
I believe high school is like too late already because I'm hearing stories.
I agree.
It's like you touched on it and you're correct. Middle school years.
Yes.
These
Oh, yes.
girls, 11, 12,
Oh, yes.
13. That's
Very
the
much risk.
age. And also a lot of girls these days that I see that are 11, 12, 13, 14, they look very mature.
Oh,
But
yes.
they're still kids and this
Yes.
is, they're still children. And
Yes.
we both know they prey, these traffickers,
Oh,
on
yes.
vulnerable or
Yes.
on, I have a little money if you want to answer a phone or you look beautiful or I want to be your boyfriend, and they work
Yes.
their way.
Yes.
And that's how, and of course, a young woman, and again, there are boys too, but it's primarily different stats. And because it's such a dark subject matter, we don't have the true stats on what's going on, but it's either 79% are women and girls or 83% trafficked are women and girls. And vulnerable kids who maybe don't have, single parent who works a job
Yeah.
or two, not home.
Right.
They're
Right.
lonely, they're hanging out.
Right.
These people really know how to zoom in
Oh, yes.
and look for these kids.
Oh, yes.
Or, be in the neighborhood of a school. And
Yes.
the one thing I have come to, and I am not a hateful woman, but everything I am dealing with, Rita, there's a woman in the background orchestrating, working with the male trafficker. She's the one that gets in there and she's the big sister, or she's the mom figure, or she's the one I'm going to hire you. I cannot believe that women do this. Now, we do know that trafficking, they're saying about 50%, the government stats, are trafficked by their own families.
Yes, that's a whole nother phase.
So there's so
Shocking.
many,
Shocking.
there is so much is happening on this. How would
Yes.
you, when you went into the school, how would you start that presentation with the kids?
I would put up key words on the board, such as trafficker, buyer, recruiter, fraud, force, coercion, and I would say, okay, now we're going to watch this 20-minute video, and I want you to try to identify these terms while you're watching the movie. And it was this video is put out by Shared Hope, and it's called Chosen. And it's the story of two girls who were both trafficked in very different situations, came from very different family backgrounds. But it's, like I said, a short video. And so after the 20-minute video, we would break it apart, and we would talk about, okay, who was the recruiter, who was the trafficker, who was the buyer, was there any fraud in that situation, was there any coercion in that situation, was there any force in that situation. And so they could begin to take each story apart and look for those key elements in an attempt to show them really the anatomy of what human trafficking looks like. Because those would be the constants in every situation.
What was their reaction to you, the students?
You know, it was interesting. Sometimes they would look totally disinterested. Maybe they'd even be just on their phones, you know, while the movie was going on. But when I started asking questions, they knew the answers. And there were some who feigned total disinterest, but I never, when it came to discussion time, the discussion time generally flowed freely, where they wanted to talk about it, and they were willing to learn. Mm-hmm.
That's wonderful to hear. That's encouraging.
Yeah.
What kind of questions did they ask?
Well, a lot of times I remember, even like when the video was going on, they would be ad-libbing, some of them, and saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe she said yes to that.
Right.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe she was willing to go and do that. So they were kind of showing their own disbelief for situations like that. And so honestly, there wasn't always a lot of questions. They would answer my questions that I would ask about the video. Like I said, asking them to identify the key players in the human trafficking chain. Mostly, I think because it was such new information to them, they didn't have a lot of questions, but they were soaking it all in and listening.
I was going to say absorbing. They were probably a little shell-shocked and absorbing it.
Yeah,
right.
I was going to say almost in disbelief.
Right, shell-shocked.
Just
right.
kind of quietly taking it in. And then I years ago, I found a story of a young girl who was trafficked in Cleveland, Ohio, at she was recruited from a high school nearby the one I was presenting in. So I would read this story to them and ask them the same questions. Okay, who was the recruiter? Who was the buyer? And what was the fraud in the situation? And that one rocked their world a little bit more, because when I would mention the school and the streets and the places she was taken as she was trafficked, they could relate to that, because those were things in Cleveland. Those are places that we're aware
relatable.
of.
It was very relatable and in their own
Very
neighborhood.
relatable.
So they could,
yes.
Wow, that's something. How would you, if you had to describe trafficking in just one or two sentences, how would you describe it?
Diabolical. Mm-hmm. Absolutely diabolical.
Agreed.
Yeah. I mean, I don't. It's so dark. It's so dark, and it's so.
It is overwhelming. I use that word a lot because
it's overwhelming. But you know what I think of, Lynn? Do you remember the story of? There's a story of a young boy who was walking along the beach in the morning, and the beach was littered with thousands of starfish that washed ashore overnight. And he's picking up as many as he can and throwing them back in the water. And an old man walked past him, and he said, "What are you wasting your time for? You can't throw them all back in. You can't really make a difference." And he picked one up and he threw it, and he said, and he threw it back in the water, and he said, "Well, I made a difference to that one, didn't I?" And then he picked up another one, and he said, "And I made a difference to that one, didn't I?" And so as he's saving these starfish one by one, the point is that anything we do is better than nothing.
That goes along with when I go to bed at night, I know I've tried something, raising awareness, talking to somebody every day about this makes me just feel good that I'm doing something. So now, What do you think about, I was going to ask you about a story about Cleveland, but you just relayed one. What do you think about our laws regarding human trafficking? What's your
Well,
thoughts on that?
they're getting better. They're getting better. Policemen now are more prone to see trafficking victims not as prostitutes, but as victims, rather than, as the aggressor. Also, in Cleveland, we have a human trafficking docket. So when girls are brought in for prostitution, they have a choice to go to traditional court, or they can go to the human trafficking docket, and part of the docket is that they will receive help and counseling and things like that. They also have a human trafficking docket in Columbus, Ohio, and probably other places too. I'm just not aware of all of them.
Yes.
So I remember years ago, right in the beginning, I went down to Columbus to do a human trafficking presentation at Ohio State University, and I stayed with a friend, and that friend was a policeman. And when he asked me about human trafficking and I described it, he said, "Oh no, those girls are just prostitutes."
Exactly.
And yeah, but he hadn't been educated. But in Cleveland, I knew that they were being educated. I knew that things were changing. So I thought, well, I just hope it trickles down, to Columbus sooner than later. And so I think that awareness is really being pushed. We know that cosmetologists are now being, they have to have some awareness,
Yes.
a class before they can be relicensed. ER physicians and nurses are being made aware. Flight attendants are they take a class to recognize the signs and symptoms of human trafficking. So many areas. I have a friend who's a nurse, and she just said that when she went back for her license, that one of the electives was to learn about human trafficking. And
and also all the businesses are beginning to talk about it, whether it's the airlines, the restaurant, the hotel business.
Yes,
They're
yes.
also putting
Yes.
training in. But going back to the police, you would have found it interesting. Monday night, I went to a very small symposium here in New York, and it was the ambassador from Sweden and France came to talk about how they handle their laws there, believe it or not, are so much better. Well, they wanted to share, because they've made it illegal in their countries. Prostitution is illegal, and the buying of sex is illegal. They've been doing it about 20 years now.
Okay.
Now, whereas we have prostitution is illegal, but the buying of sex is not illegal. Our country's behind on all of these things. So one of the big things I will be working on in the future with Congress is changing and creating new laws, because when I talk to people involved in the different groups and nonprofits, here's what I hear. They charge the girl. We'll use a girl. Again, we know there are young men involved as well, children, but they'll charge, as an example, a 15-year-old prostitution, perhaps, trying to get to the trafficker, and then they release the girl. They got the trafficker, and then you have this poor girl who there is no aftercare. So either somebody affiliated with the trafficker goes after this person, or the young girl will go back into the life because she has no other means. She's vulnerable, okay? And, or if she goes to a home, a lot of the homes that have any funding, they're telling me they only have 90 days worth, and then they have to turn somebody out. I was shocked to hear that we only have 2 homes in our country for boys that can be taken. 2.
About that. I
So
did not know.
yes, so I'm getting very immersed and educated myself as I'm moving along, which brings me to, I have formed, along with my colleague and dear friend Blanquita Cullum from the great state of Texas, we will be doing this Alliance to End Human Trafficking. It's going to be a major media event, Thursday, November 14th. I am feverishly working. Of course, I want you a part of that. Details to follow, but I had to be granted permission to be at Congress and do this event in the first place and they've been on recess. They're just getting back. But I was granted about 10 days ago permission. And that's going to simply be bringing in major media to cover, bringing in groups, bringing in dignitaries, members of Congress. I call it nonpartisan, not even bipartisan. I call it left, right, everybody in between, to just simply bring people together to start talking about this more, get it covered more.
Yes.
And I am noticing with the media, there is slightly more coverage, but it's still not being covered. And the alliance that I have formed with my partner Blanquita, we also have two wonderful women talk about doing, oh, Rita, the real work, from Mexico, Rosie Orozco and also Alma Tucker. And they literally have safe houses set up. I don't know how they're able to do this in Mexico. It's very dangerous, cartels and all that. They have saved, Rosie has saved over 300 young women and young men. And this is the good part also. She has been able to get we call them pimps and human traffickers. That's what we call them. She has been able to get every one of them in jail. And
Amazing.
that is amazing work. And Alma Tucker, my other associate, she's in San Diego and in Mexico, working both ends of the border. Because as we know, there's so much going on with the border. You know, my sources tell me that over 50% of those children coming over the border do not belong with that adult. So that's a whole nother issue. But these are women really doing, and I think we need this strong U.S.-Mexico alliance because of the border to stem a lot of the trafficking. Because the sad fact is, another sad fact, that the United States is the biggest buyer. I can't believe my country, now that is overwhelming.
Yeah, that is.
So that is why, how do we stem the buying of it? Because we know it's very basic. When there's money attached to anything,
Yes.
it is a business. So getting back to that symposium I was at Monday night, they talked about the legalization of prostitution. It was so educational for me to hear like the underbelly and how they're having success in France and Sweden with everything going on, and how we can bring that here, because I always say knowledge is power. I can't speak to Congress unless I'm armed with facts and you know, in order for me to get this support. And that is the dream, that we can start stemming this. But then we go into that whole issue of pornography, which they were talking about fuels the needs of the buyer, then wanting more and more to the violence and to I actually sat there. I'm pretty tough, Rita, but I'm like, ooh, this is so overwhelming. And then I had to bring myself back in and say, no, Lynn, it starts very simply raising awareness, doing what you're doing. Like I had to talk to myself and bring myself back, because I was hearing so much stuff. And my sources that tell me, I actually can't think about it, about the children.
Yes, I understand.
It's so devastating, and I have to just treat it as, and I think you might agree with me on this, almost like a business, because if we stop and think about it, I break down and cry. So I have to walk and treat it. I'm in a business every day of educating, raising awareness, talking with you, and you're a wonderful communicator, and I'm so happy. Not only are you baking and raising money for your local, charities and groups, but that you're also going out there and speaking upon it, because that is key, just getting out there and talking and bringing the people together. So Abolition Bakery, you make the most beautiful, those cupcake bouquets. I just love them. They make me so hungry. What is next? In my dream world, I want an Abolition Bakery in every state. That's what I want. But you tell me what's next for you.
Boy, the ultimate vision is unclear, Lynn, because it could go in so many directions. But it's something that I do pray about often, and I ask the Lord, what's your vision, Lord? Because really this was birthed in His heart and not in mine. But I think part of the appeal of Abolition Bakery is that it's something that any one of us could do.
Agreed.
Because it's volunteer operated, and it's home produced. and most women and a lot of men, we know how to bake. And so Abolition Bakery is something that could be reproduced. It really could be. So that could be a potential vision. But the cupcake bouquets have been so much fun for me, Lynn, because the cupcake bouquets were another thing. Probably about 2 years into Abolition Bakery, I had the idea to do the cupcake bouquets, but they were so difficult to figure out. They fell apart for 2 years. And for one of those years, I just decided it couldn't be done, and I just shelved the whole idea. But then one day I thought, no, I'm just going to keep doing more research on it. And now they are together. Now they are stable. Now they're being sold. And it is so much fun to see them come together. And each one is so beautiful. I don't know what they're going to look like until they're actually together. And I'm always so pleased. And I feel like the bouquets are so pretty, and they're unusual. And I feel like it's a gift.
Yes, that's how I look at them.
It's a gift of potential financial revenue for the human trafficking cause. And so I'm just, the bouquets are my favorite thing.
You can't help, it's like a baby. You can't help but smile when you see a baby. Well, I look at these cupcake bouquets, it's like a baby. You automatically smile. They bring you joy. Like, you just look at them visually and they make you happy. And to me,
absolutely.
To me, that's like a hidden gem. That's a hidden secret. If you can make somebody smile, like that's it. I just think, again, Rita, simply, you took this whole human trafficking in your own community, volunteer-based, you're doing it, people are coming to you and working with you, bringing you more ideas or outlets to sell the goods, and that is what people need to do in their own community, because there is actually a lot of great work being done, and not by the government. It's being done like this, because that red tape, as we know, holds everything up. But I am determined to be at the forefront in Washington and really bring people together so we can begin to change this a little bit with the laws and we need more resources, of course, money for homes and for aftercare. I was speaking the other night to two wonderful doctors, and there is not enough outlets, forget the money even, that are dealing with the aftercare. I mean, it's psychological, it's financial, it's a whole big thing. I think of this as a big wheel with like all these spokes. You know, and we got to just take one spoke at a time. So I am determined somehow, some way, I'm going to get you to Washington for our event. And I hope you'll participate. More on that, of course, later. And spread the word of Abolition Bakery for every community, Rita. And what we're going to do is take this video, and I will have all of your contact information and your website, because I know right now, and I said this to you the other day, people are going to want to order things. So you really, you can't really send a cupcake bouquet across the country, but you could send potentially some bread and some, things like that. So, but that'll all be laid out there for everybody. Now, final thoughts, Rita. In your dream world, in your world, what would you like to see about human trafficking? What would you like to see happen with all of this that's going on?
I would like to see more vocational training for the survivors. I think of my own background. I came from humble beginnings, but I went to college and I was trained as a surgical technologist. And when I became a single parent, that skill got me through the years of raising my children. So I know that having a vocational skill makes a big difference. And so the thought of providing vocational training for human trafficking survivors is, to me, that is key to their being able to, live a normal life again.
Change their lifestyle. Because also the other night, I know I keep referring, but it was so powerful the other night, this symposium I was at, and to hear people working in all of this globally and their successes and what we need to do, they were saying that 89% of prostitutes are really human trafficked victims. They do not want to they say they do not want to be in that business.
Absolutely.
So it's not, so again, it's hard to wrap your mind around. They're not prostitutes. They've been trafficked.
Yeah.
They're money
They're
makers.
not there by choice.
Right. They don't want. And then they say, what else can I do? They're so vulnerable and they're so to your point of vocational training, that is part of this aftercare I'm talking about. That it's shocking to me in our country. We don't have this in place, you know? We don't have, and I'm hearing this every single day.
Yeah,
so,
there are some organizations who are doing it and doing it well. I just don't know, you know, I think there could be more. Yeah.
There has to be more because, again, with the trafficking increasing because it's a moneymaker.
Yes.
So more people are vulnerable.
Yes.
We need more resources to stem this.
Yes.
So, Rita, I just want to thank you for taking the time today. I so admire you, and I want everybody to talk with you and be educated by you, and I want everybody to start their own Abolition Bakery.
There you go.
Because you are proof, and there's nothing better than proof. You're doing a wonderful job. I thank you. We'll have this video up later.
Okay.
And Rita, thank you so much in the name of all the people you're helping and saving. And don't make me cry. And the children. Children. And I'm actually so blessed that I've been introduced to you. So thank you for all of your work,
thank you,
Rita.
Thank you for this opportunity. I really appreciate it. And thank you for your big heart.
You're welcome. Big heart. And your big heart too, Rita. We work together and we're going to get the job done.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.